Okay, go live. Space, the final frontier. These are the voyages of the global left, trying to figure out how to fix the world today. So, okay, fam, let's make this happen. Welcome everybody. Welcome everybody to today's awesome streaming chat. We got the amazing Curio in the house, and we're gonna.
Hello.
Yeah, but there you go. He should be. Oh, okay. There you go. I'm gonna resize this because it's. Woo! There you go.
Okay.
Say hello to the gang. Hey, gang.
Hey, gang.
We got a lot of nice people today with us. We got Inga Leonora, we got P.D. Morin, we got Dinero por Nada, Evie Rosque, Dennis at 4 a.m., Key of the Fields, and we got Timid Fem in the house. Thank you all for joining. It's gonna be a fun ride because we're asking ourselves like, is Star Trek communist? So I don't know if you know this guy over here, right? Well, I must say I loved your recent video about anime being cursed. It's fantastic. It's
Thank
fantastic.
you.
It's I like the thing. I like the fact that it does kind of leave an open question. Like yeah, but you know we'll get there.
I got a comment recently telling me that none of my videos have endings, and then I made this video and I was like, well, it's kind of up to you guys. And I was like, oh no, they're right.
Right? And yeah, I think that's the way to go. Actually, you know.
Yeah.
Just to make it happen. So, okay. So apparently my audio is skipping. I need to fix some stuff. Why is it skipping? Why is it doing stuff? Okay. Okay, but it's understandable. You know what? Fair enough. Good enough. Don't worry about it. Inga, you're gonna have to rewind to get the audio. I mean, we could play it again, but you know, this thing's gonna record anyway. So, okay. So, is Star Trek communist, and up to what point? What do you think?
So, I think that we're going into a situation where it's like, yes, but is the best way to start answering, right? So it's like so obviously communist, like it's so like obviously, right? But there are various things you should question about this because like most of all the shows, all the films, they center around a military hierarchy.
Yep.
So like, there's what kind of communism are we dealing with, or what kind of socialism are we dealing with? You know, because like on the one hand, you could argue that like if the Federation are just sort of an extension of like if they grew out of something like NASA, you know, then are they an extent of like American imperialism? How has this affected Earth in the future? Like we see a lot of people speaking like, you know, all the series is mostly set in with English speaking characters.
So true.
So this is having an effect.
So
But on
true.
the other hand, like they have joined an interplanetary federation, and I mean, the clue's in like it's federated, it's a federation. So
Yeah.
I mean,
Yeah. I mean, it's kind of tricky. Like in maybe in Starfleet they could be a little bit more like MLs.
yeah, yeah,
And
exactly.
also, like in the series, we don't get to see a lot of civilian society.
Mm,
Like
mm,
we don't. I mean, we get to see I don't know Cisco's dad restaurant. We get to
yeah.
see. I think in Voyager we get to see Tom Paris in jail. Like I think he was doing some gardening or something like that, which is kind of.
I had a, I, I had a thought when I was working on my video Socialism in Space, which is about it's about Picard, right, and the Enterprise in the Next Generation.
Yeah.
It's like every other ship captain would be happy to call the Enterprise Picard's ship, right? Possessive, like it's his ship, but it's not. It belongs to everyone.
Of
So
course.
like,
And ships kind of change captains as well every now and then.
exactly right. Like, so there is a kind of a lack of strict ownership and property. Like everything is for the greater good. They don't have currency, and yet there is still also clear possessive nature. For example, someone being the captain of a ship.
Yeah.
But what that kind of means is like what it means for that to be his ship is kind of like this is the ship that he does his captaining with. Like the only things that actually belong to people are the things they do with their lives,
Yeah.
which I think is kind of essential socialist utopian thinking. Like it's kind of like, you know,
Yeah.
creating a system where there's no property and it's yeah, the only thing that people truly have is like what they choose to do and who they choose to be.
Yeah.
That's pretty cool.
Yeah, yeah. There's this, and I think it was in some of Captain Picard's speeches that he says like, you work only for your own improvements, and there's also like, could be like this captain's ship could be like, hello, this is my uncle. The uncle doesn't belong to you,
Yeah,
but the
yeah,
uncle is related to you. You know what I mean?
yeah,
So,
yeah.
it's the ship that is captained by this captain, but
I think maybe a better example would be Picard's family vineyard, right?
yeah,
Because that's land ownership.
yeah,
They're doing something with that land and it occupies space, but like, and it's also clearly hereditary, like they've been there a long time.
yep.
But again, I don't know that we understand the nature of like, do they own the land or is it just like what they are doing there? I don't know. It's like there are interesting questions of property ownership in Star Trek, and I think that Scarcity has maybe the biggest impact on ownership
Yeah,
because like the fact that they can literally just create anything. They've got the replicators. They can just make anything they want all the time.
yeah.
Property has the biggest effect.
Like you could justify having your family vineyard by saying, okay, everybody's got enough of everything. Everybody's got enough land, and they've expanded, and there are colonies and whatnot. They're not
Right.
like colonies in a colonial sense, but colonies like people
Yeah.
going to places in uninhabited places to go and live a life. But you can totally afford to have like a vineyard for yourself, and it's fine because you're not taking any other people's space. The final
Exactly.
frontier. But
Yeah.
not that kind of space. You know what I mean? You can have that family, which is like it's very strange because the family vineyard, the Picard family vineyard, it's like a monument to their own legacy. It's like doesn't really function. Like you can have like wine, the best wine ever from the replicator straight ahead. So it's kind of more like this is what I want to do to improve myself. This is what I want. I want to keep my family heirloom and work the vineyard and whatnot.
Right, exactly. That's one of the best things about when Picard is having that speech with the capitalist who's been woken up, who was cryo frozen.
I love that one.
The capitalist says like, "Where's the challenge?" And I love that because like, if you think about Picard's vineyard, what do any of his family do that for if not the challenge? Like it's only for the challenge. There's a bit in one of the original series films where Kirk is just climbing a cliff.
Yeah.
And Spock floats up next to him on rocket boots.
Yeah.
Says,
Yeah.
Captain, what are you doing? You can just get up on the rocket boots. And Kirk just goes, it's for the challenge, it's because I want to, because I want to test myself.
Yeah, and that seems like a very rooted thing. They do it also on Enterprise. They're very into climbing and whatnot. Could be also like could work as the metaphor for I don't know, superation and trying to overcome your own accepting challenges just for the sake of challenges. I don't know. Could go either way. The thing is, most of these messages are kind of ambiguous. Like we could read things that maybe are like undoubtedly, let's say, communist, like in a way that they said clearly that they don't have a currency, that they don't use money anymore, like they've overcome money. Money is not a thing anymore, which is one of the things that proposes the Communist Manifesto and Marx proposes all the time. And this working to improve yourself, so no private ownership of the means of production, which is like everything is public, and you don't have to work for a living, which is like the most anarchist thing ever, or say utopian communism. But there's also, as you said, these are like the few very unequivocal, like out there, very clear things that are like there's no other interpretation, But
I think that there are things that go. I think there are things like you're saying, they're really out there, and it's just so obvious. Like Picard is just like, we don't have money, done. But then there are things that like are really just like embedded in what the franchise has always been all the time.
Yeah.
Like, for example, if you think about the Kobayashi Maru, right?
Mm-hmm.
Everyone is taught in Starfleet Academy, like sometimes there will be a no-win situation, and it's kind of like this kind of training, like obviously that's to do with like military tactics and so on, but at the same time it kind of shows that their education is kind of more of a philosophical and very like kind of spiritual one, where they are all given a test in which they have to fail. Like that's the point, and then they're like put through that exercise because they think it's like important for the enrichment of like people.
Yeah.
And I just kind of think, again, it just ties back into that philosophy. Or for another one that's kind of more clear cut, but again a bit more embedded. There's an original series episode where there's like a philanthropist, and then he turns out to be like a monstrous alien. I'd forgotten about this episode, but then somebody commented on my video on Reddit, okay, because I put it on Reddit, on the Star Trek subreddit, and I got all these responses. Oh, you think Star Trek is communist? What the fuck, man? You're just putting your politics into Star Trek. And I was like, fuck, are you kidding me? Are you kidding me with this? And there was this one guy who said, yeah, if you just like read Star Trek that way, I'm sure you can just believe anything. But there's an episode where they clearly have currency because there's a philanthropist, and he's a rich guy, so that they must have money. Although at the end he turns out to be like an alien tentacle monster, but I'm sure that's evidence that it's communist as well. And I was like, fucking yeah, man! Stories written by people. Are you kidding me? Yeah, of course. That's what it means.
Exactly, and it's like 60s code. Like there you go, in your face, he's a monster.
Yeah, exactly.
Duh. Gene Roddenberry be in the house, right? Like what the hell? Yeah, and then there's this business with the Federation credits, but I don't know the function of these Federation credits. And what do you remember? Does anybody in the chat remember when they introduced the concept of Federation credits? Like, was it on one of the movies? It was not on the original series, and I don't think it was in the animated series that I haven't seen so much. But I think it was probably in TNG, and TNG was the 80s, and the 80s were problematic. It's one of the things that are like tricky to analyze if Star Trek is communist or not. It's like what if we you mean TOS, you mean TAS, you mean TNG, you mean Voyager, you mean DS9, which one?
Yeah.
It's like, so many interpretations here and there, it's tricky to figure out in which instance has, and it supposedly, goes throughout also several centuries, like 2 or 3 centuries, if I'm not mistaken.
True.
Like it starts with the Enterprise series, like it's 22nd, and then the original series reaches like 23rd century, I guess, and 24th century for TNG, DS9, and Voyager. So things change. And
Yeah.
yeah, people are pointing out also to the Ferengi. Like, yeah, the Ferengi are they like mostly on DS9 like an attempt to whitewash capitalism?
I think the Ferengi are one of the clearest examples, like, that Star Trek is socialist, and also that it like despises capitalism directly. Like, they just introduced these characters who are absolutely fucking disgusting. Like, and I don't just mean to like to look at, or I don't. I'm not just saying like that they're like ugly designs, but like just over and over again, the whole point of the characters is just that they only believe in like greed and trade, and they just suck, and that's the
Yeah,
point.
yeah,
Um, yeah, I don't think that they should be taken as like a softening of capitalism at all. Like the only times when like Ferengi characters are like good is when they're kind of won over by humans who kind of convince them of communism, basically. Like, they're introduced, they're horrible characters, and then they slowly learn, oh, actually maybe you can just like share things and be nice to people, and then they become a bit better.
yeah.
Like, and that's the only time that they're good.
The moment where I think it's Quark's brother, he gets unionized and he starts quoting Marx. Like, you know, it's like maybe they're learning. I mean, are they becoming social democrats? It's
I
hard to
love,
say.
yeah. I love the idea of a scene of like one of the Ferengi holding like Das Kapital, and Cisco comes in and he's like, "Have you read this? It's fucking great."
Yeah, exactly. And then like Ferengi, I don't know. It's tricky because they show that they're backwards. They show that the females are not supposed to wear clothes in public or something like that, and they show a lot of backward stuff. But then they go and say like, no, but Ferengi has never waged a war. We're like true pacifists. Like
Right.
they go like the Ferengi criticize Federation for being so militaristic. Like is you know maybe I don't know if they're trying to play both sides, and I don't know what was all of that about. When they you know
I think a writing standpoint, it's kind of like it doesn't have to always work so cleanly as like one kind of allegory. Like, you're going like they're the capitalists, and they're also pacifists, so they're kind of good guys in some way. It can kind of just be like they are the opposite, so they have like a criticism from the outside,
yeah
and like the important criticism to make of the Federation
yeah
always is that it's so militaristic. That's always the important kind of criticism to look at. So I would argue that from a writing standpoint, it's just like they're trying to communicate this idea of like an outsider perspective criticism. It's not there to say like these capitalist guys, they're good, you know?
nuance, I guess that would be the
Yeah,
point.
exactly.
Yeah,
Exactly.
absolutely. I get it. Totally. The thing is, it's hard to say. Like, as I said before, like we don't see that much of civilian society in Star Trek. We see a lot of Starfleet adventures, and we see
Mm.
like a lot of exterior politics. They're not they don't manage like interior politics. They always like foreign
Right.
affairs
It's always
type of
about
thing.
foreign policy, yeah, for sure.
So it is hard to say. Like we need to really reach out and infer like a lot of stuff from where these people coming from, and what are the influences. Like at the point where Gene Roddenberry died, and I remember having seen some video, some interview of I think it was Ronald D. Moore or something that was saying like, okay, we can put more conflict now into it, because one of the ideas of Gene Roddenberry is like, no, but everybody's cool with each other within the Federation, within Starfleet, and everything. Everything is super balanced in there, and then they have to deal with the other,
Yeah.
with the other people. They have to try and extend diplomatic relationships with these other people, and which are mostly like imperialistic, like the Klingons and the Romulans are like clearly imperialistic, like the Dominion and whatnot.
Yeah. He's just like, I would simply debate the Klingons. Um, I think there's definitely a huge amount of inference going on, but another point is contrast against other science fiction. I mean, for one thing, like science fiction as a genre is generally written by pinko scum like us. Like it's like there tends to be like a lot of fucking communists in writing science fiction. Like I think Vonnegut once said that science fiction writers as a group know absolutely nothing about science, and that's because like they generally get into the thing to write stories about the future being like, you know, as a societal critique, like comparing the future against now as a, you know, to send messages, usually kind of very on the nose messages.
Yeah.
And because of that, like as a genre, like typically I think you see, if you're writing a dystopia, it's capitalism in the future, and if you're writing a utopia, it's not anymore. Like I compared Star Trek and Blade Runner in my video.
Yeah, I remember
And
that
it's
one.
just like, you know, I just think we would be seeing a kind of very a very pessimistic viewpoint if the Federation were to be understood as anything other than socialist, because like, although as you say we're kind of inferring, but like I just think that it would all be kind of that like gritty realism of like, you know, oh, it's all about trade and what opportunities and the currency and the like. It would be this kind of so okay. Somebody said like people have such a hard time understanding the word neoliberalism.
Yep.
Because it's like a fish trying to understand what water is.
Yeah.
We're surrounded by it, so painting a picture of it is really hard for people. And similarly, if you were writing a story and it was about this like capitalist society in the future, I think people would have a really fucking hard time like creating like their sort of picture of like this beautiful society and it's capitalist and that's a good thing, and here's my big speech about why capitalism is good. Whereas if you've got an idea of something that's not the system you currently live in, you can go like, this is what it will be like. There will be magic machines that just make everything everybody needs, and no one has money because everyone just does everything for the greater good, and like this. So I think to some degree it has to be anti-capitalist just because they are describing a different future. Like they're describing the future being different to the way we are now.
Yeah, I see what you mean. We could actually agree that at the very least, Star Trek is socialist. At the very least.
That's what I'm saying. Like baseline, very baseline, right?
Then moving forward, you know,
Yeah.
it certainly is not capitalist. Like Federation in Star Trek is not capitalist. And capitalist would be the Ferengi that would like could be like capitalists that would lucky enough, so they didn't create like a lot of structural violence by by having a totally capitalist system, which is like ridiculous.
Yeah.
But okay, we buy it, you know, because whatever. It does sound ridiculous though. Like,
I like the idea you're watching this show and you're like, space travel, aliens, fine, I got it.
yeah,
Capitalists that don't cause conflict? Oh, I can only suspend my disbelief so long.
yeah, exactly. Like what? I mean,
You kidding me?
yeah, I mean, we can travel to the future and create technology that is amazingly good and makes us do all that crazy stuff like space travel and warp and you know, transporters, whatnot, and replicators. But a capitalist system that doesn't create violence, I'm unconceivable. Like on the Princess Bride, right?
Yeah.
But I don't know. You know, so at the very least, socialist. Let's say.
Yeah.
I always wanted to think like the Star Trek painted like a perfect utopian communism. Like a picture of a utopian communism would be like that, you know, all those, the amazing technology, the amazing society, and in a way, you know, I think that we're going like our technology keeps advancing, but our society is like stale there, it's like lagging behind more and more. So in a way, I think we're advancing more to that dystopia, to that Blade Runner picture, to that Neuromancer picture,
Yeah, I
then
mean, without big change, I'd probably agree. Yeah.
like we really need to catch up socially, like to get the Star Trek eventually. I always painted like this. I always paint this picture in my head like a baboon with a shotgun. You know what I mean? Not knowing what to do with that technology that exceeds them, but having like the wrongest ideas to how to use them.
Yeah. That's a good picture. Yeah.
And
Very
so
illustrative.
in a way, I don't know. There's I think it was Sam who punted in the chat. They wanted us to comment about the Bell riots in DS9, that DS9 episode where they travel to the past.
Right.
There's this DS9 where Cisco and a few other more. I think Cisco is the one that tries to impersonate this historical character. They try not to mess up the timeline because apparently something I don't remember exactly, but yeah, it plays like a lot of social commentary of pre-Federation or the transition to the Federation and how they, kind of like
Yeah, I know what you're saying. Yeah. The period up to leading up to there is really fascinating because the canon history for it is that like the Earth really fell to total garbage. Like it was just the climate crisis was out of control. There was rampant inequality. People were just like governments fell apart. Everyone was kind of living in this like I think they practically reach a sort of anarcho-capitalist Mad Max situation.
yeah,
Like things are really fucking bad,
yeah.
and then they discover warp travel, which hmm,
Because yeah,
that's not what we have to do
that
because that's
fixes everything. I mean, by the tutelage, I think it was Inga who pointed out that the tutelage of the Vulcans was like a big, also cornerstone into this
that's true.
social change.
That's true. That's true.
It could be like Vulcans had like this more seated idea of like a society is because of their cult of logic and whatnot, which kind of later on Enterprise they showed like the Vulcans they had the problems too, like a lot of corruption, and they even had like an infiltrator in their own government by the Romulans and whatnot. So uh,
But
it's
but when the
tricky. I really
but
like
when
that.
they show up to the humans, the Vulcans are like, okay, guys, socialism is the only way. Facts don't care about your feelings. It's only logical, comrades.
Facts don't care about your feelings. Yeah, but minus the grifting. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
But in a way, it is tricky. Like it's a form of like the narrative. It's kind of accelerationist. Like okay, society needs to go all the way to dump to the garbage, so we can start over, guided
Right.
by this other species of people that are the Vulcans that happen to understand each other because they developed the universal translator, which is one of the things that you said earlier. Like everybody speaks English, but yeah, I mean it's coded in English because there's
That's
the
true.
universal translator. I think it was in Enterprise as well. It's almost nobody know. I mean, there's a teeny tiny fraction of Trekkies that really appreciate Enterprise because everybody's trashing it very hard. But I see like there's a lot of things that I really like about it. One of them is like we don't have these technologies yet, so and they're like trying to catch up and trying to say but the Vulcans are so uptight and they think they know better,
Right.
and it's kind of the we got it figured out from the Vulcans and but we can make it from the humans kind of attitudes, and also they don't have like the universal translator, and they have to have this Hoshi Sato figuring out all the time how to talk to people because if they mess it up. And I think it was where there was this Star Trek movie where Captain Picard is kind of trying to learn Hochin Chefo or something like that. It was at the very beginning. They were like in the nice uniforms and trying to figure out a diplomatic solution. I'm not the best. I'm not the best Trekkie. I love Star Trek. I've seen the whole thing. I don't know things by heart. I like this. This is like a fish memory, man. It's goes.
I'm far from encyclopedic with my knowledge, but yeah. Um, maybe we can cross another thing off as like we figured it out, right? So we agree that it's clearly socialist.
Definitely.
Is it also accelerationist though? Like that's what you're saying. Like if their history is explicitly like everything turns to garbage and then they have this sort of big revolutionary change, you know?
Yeah.
Well, okay, maybe not accelerationist, but maybe it's like definitely revolutionary. Maybe it's
Yeah.
like yeah. Is it yeah, like I don't know that Star Trek shows great kind of love for like reformism.
Maybe.
Like I don't know any big examples where kind of like just iterative reform has been kind of enough. Like the show, like I think even in situations where the shows where the franchise shows like the best way through is to talk rather than to be violent. Let's try to avoid conflict and so on. Like
Yeah.
it doesn't show it as like now let's compromise and like only have half as many homeless people or something. It's always like when there are like big injustices, Star Trek is always like, no, there should be none of this. It should be entirely eliminated, and there's like no alternative kind of thing.
Yeah.
Like it's the attitude that repeatedly shows up.
Yeah.
Someone Inga just said that the Prime Directive is anti-accelerationist. That's interesting.
It's anti-interventionist for sure, but the thing is,
Yeah.
what reinforces for me the accelerationist part is this post-apocalyptic rebuilding of the society that leads to humanity finally learning the lesson that capitalism is not the way and socialism is the way to improve a civilization. But yeah, the Prime Directive. In which way, please explain? Like, if you can elaborate a little bit more, into how it's not acceleration. I think the narrative is. That doesn't mean to say that that the federation as a constituted thing is an acceleration government, but I think the narrative, like how we get there, is like a little bit like, okay, then shit hit the fan and then bam, and
exactly.
then we learned our lesson finally the hard way.
You could obviously definitely say that like the humans are just one example of a society in Star Trek, but also they're the humans. Like they're always the humans are a metaphor for the humans. Like you can't argue that like they're just or the humans represent somebody else. No, they're obviously us.
Yeah.
So like I think that the fact that this human society does crumble and then through like a little like through a luck of invention and like they come up with this solution that then kind of gets them rescued by the logic men.
Yeah.
Like at the same time, you could say but you could say again that represents like people coming about who have the answers. Again, if you kind of just see the Vulcans as the space communists, right? Then the sequence of their history of like they come up with warp travel and the Vulcans first contact. The metaphor in there is essentially like things have fallen apart, but there opens up a sort of window for people who have the answers to come in and say, this is how society should be. This is what we're going to do. Here's the plan. But yeah, I think we can agree that the Prime Directive is anti-interventionist, but I don't... Inga's saying something, so we need to ask, is the human history the primary narrative or the Federation? And I would argue the latter. So the Prime Directive suggests that under no circumstances can the Federation interfere with the natural progression of pre-warp society.
Food for thought. Good one, yeah. Food for thought. Very, very good point. Damn it.
Yeah. Yeah. But I've got to say, hang on. So the premise of the Federation as a moral actor in the galaxy is expressly not accelerationist. There is a key criteria for interaction, warp capabilities. After that, they get a guide. But okay, but how is that itself not accelerationist, or rather anti-accelerationist? Because, like,
I mean,
given that we're presented with the situation where human society collapses and then they get the warp technology, like that's kind of an accelerationist narrative.
and it kind of operates under the assumption that getting warp technology makes you like liable for improvement in your society, which wouldn't be the case with, for instance, the Klingon Empire or the Romulan Empire or the Ferengi, for that matter. Like their societies are obviously flawed.
But like I'm saying, the warp technology clearly represents, like, so the Prime Directive, because the warp technology represents access to the Federation. Like, literally, I mean, it's travel, it's the ability to get there, and it's also the Prime Directive. So if you don't have warp, then you're not allowed to be involved. And it's kind of like, again, we can agree it's anti-interventionist, but I feel like it's, yeah, like the warp technology represents access to the ideas of the Federation, and i.e. socialism. Like, so those societies like the Klingons, okay, they are allowed to converse with the Federation and know about the Federation and be involved, but at the same time, like, I don't know, at the same time, it doesn't necessarily mean the Federation is just going to instantaneously overtake them with these ideas of sharing and peace and love.
Yeah, I mean,
And
it could be
that
like
again
that.
is anti-interventionist, anti-imperialist, even, because the Federation isn't. Although the Federation wants everyone to join the Federation, it's also like not. It's also not like colonizing the Klingons or so on. Like they want them to like join on their own terms.
Yeah, definitely, and they refuse applications to join the Federation as well if their societies don't, comply to the standards.
Mm.
We could say like the warp technology could be like a pass to enter the diplomatic game, the intergalactic diplomatic game. Let's say like having like a intergalactic diplomatic relationships. So that would require for your society to step up and say, okay, let's get up to standards, and then when we're mature enough, then we can enter that game. Kind of a way to not to have like a crazy wild actor messing up interstellar diplomacy, I guess. It's a little ambiguous, to say
I
the
wonder.
least.
So if we think about warp technology and the Prime Directive in the context of industrialization, in the context of 20th century human history, like industrialization and then access to communism, or access to ideas of shaping societies in this way, is actually an interesting question, because a lot of the USSR was not industrialized when the USSR was formed, and through the rapid period of industrialization, through like essentially trying to push it through industrialization, a lot of people were killed, and a lot of people didn't have access to the things they needed, and it caused some large shortages, some serious problems. And you could argue that the Prime Directive might be a direct coded response to that situation. There are numerous examples from around the globe of countries that weren't industrialized and were either caught up in American imperialism or caught up in Soviet imperialism.
Yeah.
And in both cases, they tried to enforce an ideology of a society that was like too
too different than their own.
And then it caused big problems, and lots of people died because of starvation and so on.
So true.
And I think maybe the warp technology is a metaphor for that. It's just like it's just like it's allowing that growth. I think, yeah.
Yeah, could totally be that. Like what if technology is kind of the metaphor of the Industrial Revolution and what happened in the 20th century.
Mm.
And
You just said that thing about like the Federation turning down applications to join the Federation
yeah,
based on how the societies of the applicant were, and I kind of think in that case is the Federation kind of like a communist version of the EU,
yeah.
like like to some degree, right? Because
You mean
what
what the EU should be?
yeah, exactly. If only the EU were communist, like if like the like the EU obviously like controls the situations of like okay, I'm gonna talk a little bit kind of exaggeratedly for a second, and I'm not meaning this to sound so crazy, but if we view the EU as an imperialist force,
Yep, which
okay,
is. Yep, no problem.
okay, cool. Then classically empires have always had client states, which are states that are not invaded, do not belong to an empire, but have to do everything the empire says, otherwise they will just get invaded. The EU kind of works in the opposite way. It won't let it. It will refuse people like countries a bit like applications to join. It will refuse countries joining the eurozone unless they comply to standards. So it kind of works in the opposite way. If a country is not doing anything, then they kind of choke them out by refusing trade.
Yeah.
And I kind of feel like, yeah, the Federation kind of operates in a similar way to that. Like
Geopolitics in Spain, in space, basically. It's
yeah, exactly.
it's crazy, and I don't want to get super sidetracked, but I kind of want to tell you this. I had this crazy idea lately, like let's ditch the European Union and make like a new like a new Soviet unions of southern European countries. Could be like Greece, Italy, Spain,
Yeah,
France, Portugal, and Ireland, and try and have all those countries that have been defined by the European Union as second class. Just get together and go like full socialist, motherfuckers.
I feel like this could be like a goal of DM25. Like they're trying to like turn things around through the electoral politics of like within the EU, but they could just focus on creating something outside of the EU, like creating a different body,
like a geopolitical parallel power structure or something, something
exactly.
crazy like that. And I mean, Varoufaki's gang, right? I don't know. I mean, could be a good idea, but okay, let's go back to Star Trek because it's very easy that Grandpa gets like sidetracked and
No, let's get back to Star Trek. But I do just want to say I like this idea. I mean, it's not dissimilar to it's kind of like unionizing, but for the countries who are being treated badly by the
Yeah, the Plan B Europe and whatnot. It could be like a very, very good idea. Like, hey, European Union, we don't need you anymore. Check it out. The UK can join eventually.
When things get bad enough for us after Brexit, I think.
I don't know. I think that Spain would be like the Tellarites or something.
I honestly, the simplest answer is I'm just gonna fucking move to, form this parallel structure, and I'm just gonna move to one of the countries that's involved in it, and the UK can get fucked. Like it's yeah.
Join us.
Yeah, exactly.
Gladly. I mean, gladly.
So back to Star Trek.
Yeah, back to Star Trek. Do you think the Vulcans are like a metaphor? Because we've been talking about it, and maybe. Okay, this is a long shot. Okay, but I'm just gonna throw it out there. Do you think the Vulcans are a metaphor for dialectic dialectic materialism? Like their logic is kind of dialectic materialism or scientific socialism.
I do think I mean like okay, there's this very like the Marxists of the like 50s and whatever were all up for this kind of scientific socialism talk where it's kind of like oh, we're uniting everything. It's philosophy and economics and anthropology. It's all one science, and the science is Marxism. Like it explains everything, kind of thing.
Yeah.
And like to some degree, yeah, like the Vulcans do act like that. They just kind of like they have this one thing, and it's just logic, right? Like they do talk like just logic is the kind of uniting thing. And like if you kind of viewed like if you just kind of swapped out logic for Marxism, like they're kind of yeah, it kind of works, I think.
They're like pure Marxists.
Yeah.
I don't know where Maoism would fall into all of this, but give me a minute. I'll find one.
I feel like it would be you know, you were saying this thing earlier about after Gene Roddenberry wasn't in charge anymore.
Yeah.
And there was this idea like, oh, we can write more conflict in. But like, while I do support the kind of presenting a utopian vision and everyone's united and there's no problems like within the Federation or within human society, I do also think like presenting like there's an understanding of spectacle, right? Where people love to see sort of two sides fighting,
Yep.
and when two sides are fighting, they like to pick a side.
Yep.
And I made this joke a few times, right? Which is like Jack Saint and I could win over all the gamers on YouTube if he makes only makes videos saying this game is bad because there aren't enough gay people in it, and I only make videos saying no, the game is good because it does have gay people in it. And then like they have to pick a side, so they and I think that like the same kind of thing is true. Like you could probably write something. You could there's a big opportunity I feel in the Federation to represent kind of leftist infighting, although that can be a little ugly. But like to represent like a conflict between like say anarchist ideas and statist ideas, or getting more granular, getting down to like Trotskyists and Maoists or something. It would. I'd be fascinated to see like that. A sort of.
Yeah, it's a pity. That, like, it's a pity. That having so much Trotskyism having so many valid ideas, they all become like neutralized by how dirtbag was actually Trotsky, but. Like, oh, come on, dude! Trying to kill your own comrades, it's like, Trotsky. I mean, well deserved that pilot. That how do you call the pilot? The well, whatever. how do you call it in English? The this thing you used to climb, like a picket or something like that.
Oh, I think just a pick.
Mm-hmm.
I think it's just a pick.
Okay. So that pick was right, but not because Trotskyism is invalid, but because Trotsky was a real dirtbag. Like he played very dirty. He didn't have to play so dirty. But again, different times, different dynamics, whatever. But yeah, going back to Star Trek, I get sidetracked so easily, man.
I feel. If there were kind of a maybe there's like a Trotskyist. I'm just imagining like another show now. I'm just imagining a new Star Trek where like it's mostly around like in the Federation's internal politics, and there's like a Trotskyist movement who want to like demolish the Prime Directive or something. I don't know. It's
The thing, yeah, it's difficult. I mean, there's so many episodes of the hell with the Prime Directive, and Voyager is like hey, extreme non-Prime Directive. The Prime Directive is off because we're so far away that we can't afford to abide to it, and stuff like that. So it's kind of difficult. It's kind of, I mean, I think could be that one of the reasons that we see so little of civilian society in Star Trek could be like because they're implying that there is barely no conflict there, so there's nothing TV worth it.
Yeah, maybe
to show. You know what I mean? Like what they're dealing all the time is geopolitics or space geopolitics.
Yeah, like, astropolitics, I guess.
Astropolitics. Yeah, that would thank you so much for that. That was a very good term. So astropolitics, because in Earth everything is just fine and would be super boring to tell. Like, yeah, we're just hanging out. I mean, there was this episode in and again Enterprise, because the beginning of the Federation, before the Federation was formed, there was like the very few days before the Federation was formed. So say Starfleet existed, but there were like all these racists and Terra Prime and all these make Earth great again bullshit. And that was like before the Federation. Apparently, when the Federation happened, it's like, okay, we're done. We're figured out, and there's not that many civilian stances. They just have like their time out, and they just hang out, and they just do their thing. There's a little bit of politics intrigue, but it kind of looks like the Federation is like very Marxist Leninist. Like, they have like very structured hierarchies, but society could perfectly be anarchist. So, I mean, as far as we know.
I think, again, I do like to think about Picard's Vineyard a lot, because it does present a lot of really interesting questions, in my opinion.
Yeah.
Like, it is also one of the places where we see kind of civilian life, and like it plays into what you were just saying. There's very little conflict, because when we see Picard's Vineyard, it's deliberately kind of shown to us as an example that life is boring and it's easy, and it's sweet. You just go and like work on the vineyard. Like, there isn't war on Earth, but also they do have conflict in one of my favorite episodes of TNG, actually, when Picard returns home, and he is talking to his brother, and his brother's son wants to become a Starfleet captain like his uncle.
Yep.
And Picard's brother resents him for this, and there's all this kind of family conflict over that. I think that's really interesting. Like, I don't think I don't want to sound like I'm just going like, yeah, it's really cool to show like this they're communists, but they still have problems. Like, I don't think it's like, but I do think it's really it's a kind of fairly apolitical story. It's more about family and tradition versus innovation, and kind of like the right to choose what you do with your life. I think, I don't know. I wonder if the family vineyard is kind of like a negotiated thing that they're doing with the land. If they negotiated with the governing bodies of Earth, or do they just like, this is the land they're on and they just do it? Like, is it more anarchist? Is it more statist?
It's hard to say. Hard to say. There is a federation government, for what it's worth.
Yeah, for sure. But as you said, most of what we ever see is concerned with foreign policy. We don't really see what kind of. I find anarchist versus statist one of the most interesting questions of Star Trek, because if you and I don't honestly think there are clear answers, because it would seem kind of like there are, because it's militaristic. So you're kind of just like, well, okay, there's a state, there's a military. That's not very anarchist, is it? But at the same time, like, anarchist basic philosophy is no unjust hierarchies. And if you look at, for example, Voyager, they get cast out deep into space, and they don't dissolve their hierarchy in the ship, right? They don't like stop obeying the chain of command. They keep obeying the chain of command because it's like a structure that helps them to survive, and it's like a way that they function as a ship. Like, so within the structure of like, of their military systems, maybe it is a justified hierarchy. Maybe. I mean,
yeah, it's very hard to say. I mean, there is a justified hierarchy. Like, how could they function otherwise? Like,
Yeah.
It's like, hey, warp 5. What do you mean warp 5? I said warp 7. Come on, let's go on impulse. Come on, I don't like warp. gets me dizzy. Like,
They're they're engaging in direct democracy to decide what warp level to go on.
yeah,
Yeah,
that would be tricky. It's fine to have captain to call the shots, and it's fine to also like contradict your captain and go like okay for things that affect the crew. Like it's shown I think a couple of times. Like I think it was Riker who was questioning Picard all the time,
yeah,
and there were people who were going to Riker to say to uh, air their grievances, and in a way most of the high ranking officers have like a lot of autonomy in their own department, and
yeah,
in a way the captain themselves they're like subdued to the medical authority. If they're not in the functioning well, they can confine them to sick bay and they wouldn't have a word to say about it. So it's not
yeah.
it's not about power, it's about organizing yourself well.
It's about function. Yeah, it's
it's
about being able to survive. Yeah.
it's totally ML. I mean, that's as ML as it gets.
Well, I just think that there's something. I just think that like this thing you're saying about the first mate, especially like the first mate contradicting the captain, and there being that conflict. Like that's another thing about Voyager that very early on they're establishing kind of a disruption to the hierarchy
Yep.
because very early on, Chakotay and all his people join the crew.
Yep.
And that's a whole, basically half the crew,
Yep.
who aren't from Starfleet and don't necessarily agree, and there's there's potential for internal conflict there, but they have to agree and figure out a system in which to work. And so again, arguably, if they create their system of hierarchy, they are still operating on anarchist principles because they're agreeing on a temporary hierarchy to help them to get home.
Yeah, and it's one of the interesting things of early Voyager, how they kind of try to figure out, how there's like a certain resistance, like, but we're used to the Starfleet stuff. We got a hierarchy that works already, and the Maquis showing up, and hey, but we have different way of approaching hierarchy, so we need to agree. And they go like, okay, we need to agree, but we're still gonna struggle. And it's like, okay, and they end up helping each other. It's like it doesn't get more leftist than that.
Yeah.
It's and I'd like to touch on something else. By the way, I just happened to remember.
Sure.
Discovery.
Mm-hmm.
Discovery. Like, I love it and I hate some stuff in it. Like, I remember that line and Jason Isaacs seems to be like a very stand-up guy into concerning human rights and stuff. But
Yeah.
he still delivered that line that said like great minds like Einstein, Stephen Hawking, and Steve Jobs and Elon Musk, and he's like, what? Two salesmen there? Why do you have to, shoehorn two salesmen into that line? What for? And I think it happened like a couple of times with lines on Discovery, and I was like, oh, come on, no, why?
I completely agree. Yeah, yeah.
And it could be like I don't know. I don't know if it's justified because he was like evil Lorca from the parallel universe, but somebody would have clocked him right away. Like, what?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Somebody on the bridge would be like, "What? What do you mean, Elon Musk? I don't wanna destroy your speech, but maybe you're sleeping away a little
There
bit
is
there."
something I think is a very valid point to make about Discovery. The whole canon exists in a parallel universe, like very clearly. Like they've got a different person playing Spock, and like Spock has a step sibling, and like everything is different. Like there was the war with the Klingons that they've changed the political
Landscape.
landscape so much that it's very clear it's taking place in a different timeline at this point. I mean, but it doesn't really solve the fact that like they also still said that like Steve Jobs and Elon Musk were like great minds. It's so disgusting.
Yeah, it has. I mean, it has some nice things like using the Klingons to call out all the white supremacist bullshit,
Yeah.
Remain Klingon and whatnot,
Mhm.
and the Tukufma, like the religious leader that is
Right.
leading other politicians like this other guy. I don't remember. Vok. No, Vok. No.
Yeah, he's Vok.
Vok is the but he's the no. I mean the other guy that's like more like a
Oh,
strategic
I see.
politician, like a pure imperialist, and he's buying into the Tukufma religious bullshit for a while, just so it suits his thirst for power.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah,
I think. Yeah. I mean,
they have some good stuff going on, but they mix it with the bad stuff, and it's like, oh come on.
totally. That's what can be really disappointing. Like stuff written by liberals sometimes they can do such good because liberals can write stuff that's such good like feminism or such good anti-racism,
Yep.
or in this case such good anti-fascism,
Yep.
and then they just go like, yeah, but you know who was cool? Elon Musk. It's like, fuck no, what are you
No.
doing?
Exactly.
So close.
Yeah, I mean, you had to do that. Did you have to? And it's also like a call to yeah. I mean, Jason Isaacs, you could have got that. You're a good person. You could have totally went like, what? Was this written here? Should I? I mean, you called out worse. You called out a lot of stuff on Twitter. Very decent person. Much respect. But Elon fucking Musk, come on.
I mean, Elon Musk donates to the Republican Party, so like as far that really like to some degree, I got to feel like that reference on its own undercuts the like the series arc they're trying to get at with this kind of make Klingon great again stuff. That they're trying to be like, hey, look, this is very clearly a Trump thing we're doing here. But then they're just like, if you think, if you're idealizing modern capitalists, like any one you pick is going to be somebody who's fucking donating to the Republican Party, which means they're funding white supremacy. Like they're literally just giving their money to. So you can't. No, absolutely not.
Yeah, totally. They shot on their foot, like bam, there you go.
Yeah.
They Brexited themselves in a way. Oh man. So yeah. So can we let's try and wrap this up for now, because I'd love to hang out more with you, man.
Yeah, it's been really fun. Yeah.
Yeah. We've
Happy
been
to come
geeking.
anytime, sure.
Yeah, we should do this more. I don't know. We'll figure it out. And do we agree that Star Trek is at least socialist and maybe communist?
We have agreed. I think we've definitely agreed it is socialist. We've definitely agreed that the Prime Directive is anti-interventionist. We've got some food for thought that Inga has given us. Very,
Oh yeah, about the Prime
think
Directive.
about that.
Oh my
But
god.
I'm not certain it's communist. I think there's I do think there's a back and forth to be had about anarchism. Maybe for another time.
Yeah, definitely.
But it's definitely socialist.
Definitely socialist. Okay, I think we got it.
Cool.
Fam, what do you think? What do you think, people, good people in the chat? Do you agree with our assessments? I don't know. Just let us know. Maybe in the comments or whatever. We have. I'm so glad to have you here. Curio, check him out on his awesome YouTube channel. Awesome media criticism. Awesome stuff. Good things. Good politics.
I got something coming out next month. It's about Ben Shapiro, Dave Rubin, Jordan Peterson. It's about the aesthetics of intellectualism. I think everyone's gonna get excited. So.
Cool. You dog in all the garbage there.
Yeah.
So cool. So please, support Curio. He's an awesome comrade and a fantastic, talented person. And we'll see you soon, okay? Have a lot of fun. Star Trek is kind of socialist.
Bye, everyone.
Bye, people. I'm gonna see where I stop this thing. Okay, there you go. Bye, people. I'm gonna play the music. Why not? Let's play it. Where do I have? No, I don't. I can play it. Okay, good one, people. Have a good one. Live long and prosper.
Live long and prosper.